That's one of the nice parts about working for someone who's a hardcore skier is he gets excited whenever we're talking about this stuff, probably to the detriment of the executive team. I think they cringe a little bit when I start talking about snowmaking.
Welcome to the storm. I'm your host, Stuart Winchester. I'm so fired up to bring you a conversation about one of my favorite little regional ski areas today, the very cool and somewhat overlooked Greak Peak, New York. First, though, a very sincere thank you to all of you for being here, especially my paid subscribers who have helped me to transform the storm into a sustainable small business. This is my full-time job, and I am laser focused on the world of lift-served skiing all year long. If you would like to support this mission of independent ski journalism, you can subscribe to the free or paid tiers of the Storm Skiing newsletter over at stormskiing.com. Another fun way to rep the storm, you can pick up some merch, a hat, hoodie, t-shirt, or sticker at the Storm store at stormskiing.myshopify.com. You can also watch this podcast at stormskiing.com or on YouTube at Storm Ski Journal. You can also follow the storm on Twitter or Instagram at Storm Ski Journal. Before we get into today's conversation, I want to tell you, if you run a ski area or an outdoor brand, you should really consider hooking up with my friends at Bonfire Collective. They are a fractional marketing team that collaborates with ski areas and outdoor brands to give your marketing a fresh perspective and better storytelling. They will supercharge your rebranding or advertising. Bonfire can help you rethink your approach in ways that can turbocharge your business, like the New Hampshire ski area, where they helped to double revenue in just 3 years. And when the storm was ready to invest in our first ever digital marketing campaign last year, I worked with Bonfire Collective to make it happen. Their ideas were great, the people were great, I love the results, and I think you will love working with them as well. To get started, you will want to hook up with Eric over at Bonfire Collective. Eric was a co-founder of Bluebird Backcountry, as you've seen on this podcast, the first human-powered ski area, and he knows the ski business. Visit bonfirecollective.com, or I will be happy to make that connection for you. All right, time for episode 217 of the Storm Skiing Podcast, the leadership team at Greak Peak, New York. My guests today lead Greak Peak Mountain Resort in New York. With 6 chairlifts serving 300 acres on 950 vertical feet, Greak Peak is the largest ski area in central New York. Wes Kryger has been resort president since 2013. He is a member of the Ski New York Hall of Fame, and his family has been connected to the resort since its founding in 1958. Aidan Wilbur has been vice president of mountain operations since 2019 and has worked at the resort since 2013. Wes, Aidan, welcome to the storm. I had an awesome time with my family up at Greak Peak in January, and I've been looking forward to this discussion ever since. How is life in central New York on this beautiful day?
Great. It's nice and sunny, which it hasn't been for the last couple of months. It's been pretty rainy, but last 3 or 4 days have been sunny and warm.
Yeah, I was there in January, had some nice conditions, nice snow. Overall, looking back at it, give us your assessment of the 2024 to 25 ski season at Greak Peak. What went well?
Well, I think this past season was fairly consistent. You know, we had a little bit of snowfall each week, no major warm-ups, no major rain. Definitely better than the prior 2 years. We had 108 ski days. We had about 116,000 skier visits, which is about average for us. It did end kind of quickly in March. After I think it was like the second week of March, we got a little bit of rain. And I think because it had been so consistent all year, the skiers were done. They had gotten their runs in and they were ready to go play golf or do whatever. Not that the weather cooperated a lot with them, but it was a good year.
And what do you have going on this off season here, Aidan? I know that you found a room with a closed door so you wouldn't be interrupted. And I'm not going to make the mistake of saying you have less to do in the summer than the winter, because I know that the opposite may be true, or maybe just as busy. So what do you got going on? I know you're always making things better at Greek Peak. Talk to us about what you have happening summer 2025.
Yeah, we have a lot going on as far as capital improvement construction going on, as well as the events that we pull off all summer. From a skiing perspective on mountain, we're doing a ton of snowmaking upgrades. A lot of it is older pipe replacement that is currently going on to kind of update that infrastructure. And we're actually installing snowmaking on 2 new trails this year.
Oh, cool. Which ones?
Zephyr and East Meadow.
Oh, great.
Yeah, really great beginner terrain. It's really going to be something that it's going to be good for our beginner customers, possibly a new beginner terrain park in East Meadow.
Are those trails that have not had snowmaking before at all, or are you just replacing old snowmaking with new snowmaking?
Correct. They've never had snowmaking before.
Oh, wow.
East Meadow serves as a really nice terrain for people to come off of our main lift.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to put real easy beginner terrain park in there. Zephyr is important from a future perspective. We ran a large transfer line up that a few years ago just to get water to the east side of the mountain. And this year we're going back and putting hydrants and air alongside of it. If we're going to run water that way to the east side, we might as well make snow on that trail.
You know, the East Meadow Trail is a great one. My family is interesting. We're a ski family, but we can't often ski together because we're all at very different levels and frankly, very different levels of love for skiing. And so everything kind of has to line up right for us to be able to ski a trail together. And what I didn't really appreciate about Greek Peak, which I'd skied it before, but with a different eye because I hadn't been with my family, what I didn't appreciate until I brought my family, my wife and 2 kids up there this past January, was these nice, beautiful green trails from the summit all the way to the base. And East Meadow is an important part of the skier's left path down the mountain. Just talk about that terrain and what an asset that is to your mountain to be able to have these top to bottom greens that are wide, that really there's nothing else like them in New York State that are a full 1,000 vertical feet.
Yeah, it's great for our beginner customers, especially our large school programs that we do every year. It allows us to get these kids to the top of the mountain and have a safe way down and build their skill set. I don't know if you remember from your time here, but our main green trail off the main pod is called Caryatides, and it kind of narrows up into a small chute. We've always struggled there a little bit. So this is where East Meadow is going to play a huge role moving forward, guaranteeing snowmaking on that trail so we can spread people out and get that great experience.
It's a great asset. You have to work for it a little bit because when you pull up, Greek Peak looks very steep because you see this terrain off lifts 1 and 1A. And those are, I think, the steepest trails on the mountain or among them. And it looks like a place where you're not going to have an easy way down. So I was really surprised to find that. Do you find that people are a little intimidated when they pull in the parking lot?
Yeah, sometimes, especially with Olympian right there. That's actually one of the steeper trails in New York State. That head wall, it's got a real steep pitch on it. It's a little intimidating sometimes. Yeah,
all right. I want to get more into snowmaking, Aidan, and I know that's been a big project, but I want to set us up first here because there's been a lot of movement under the new owners over the past decade. And Wes, I really want to dig into this because it's so rare these days with so many corporations and companies buying ski areas all over the country that I get to actually talk to somebody who's connected with the founding or the founding family or part of the founding family of a ski area. And of course, most of these ski areas were founded by families, but many, many, many of them now are part of larger companies. So take us back here. Let's start with your father, Al Kryger, who's also a member, as I mentioned, that you are of the Ski New York Hall of Fame, inducted in 1989. Tell us about your father and his role in Greek Peak's founding and history.
Well, I think, my dad grew up about a quarter of a mile up the road from Greek Peak, and his family owned some of the land that was ultimately purchased by Greek Peak. I think he was a big part. There were some local businessmen that were flying around the valley one spring trying to figure out which mountains still had snow left on them. And they picked Greek Peak because of the exposure to the sun. And He was a big part of starting that with a group of local business people, and they brought him in as the president of the company. He was originally a local fireman in the city of Cortland, and he came out to run the ski area. And I think he's been a big part of expanding it. Basically, anytime he told my dad he couldn't do it, he would do it just to prove you wrong that he was able to make it happen. So definitely a huge part of building what was here, and there were a lot of other local families that helped and were a big part of it. I think, he was always adamant about it wasn't just his dream, it was a lot of the people in the valley, the Quayle family, the Timmerman family, the Congdon family, a lot of different families that all of their dads, moms, and the kids, they all worked here and made it all happen and grow. So it was kind of a community dream. Um, so definitely a big part of expanding it, and it was his original idea to put in Hope Lake Lodge.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it was put in during a time period that the economy wasn't all that great.
Yeah.
There was actually an issue with the bank that had done the original loans, and they had loaned a bunch of money to Penske Truck,
Mm.
and Penske went under, and then the FDIC came in and took the bank over, and then notified my dad that he had to find a new lender because the bank was going to be going under. So
Mhm.
at that point, with the economy, there was nobody that was willing to take over the financing part of it. So it ended up going through a bankruptcy in 2012, 2013, and
Mhm.
that's when Mark Stemmerman and John Meier purchased the facility.
So let's pause there, and I do want to get into what John has been able to do and how they've evolved, how he's evolved Greek Peak. But I want to go into your perspective here, Wes, because given the timeline here, late 1950s when Greek Peak opened, I'm assuming you came along at some point and essentially probably grew up at the ski area. So what are your earliest memories of Greek Peak, and what was it like to grow up in that environment?
Well, I think it was definitely a great experience. Like I mentioned, all the different families, there was a bunch of us. There was probably 15 or 20 kids, in that 10 to 15-year-old range between the Krygers, the Timmermans, the Congdons. We all used to shovel the decks at the A-frame for a meal ticket,
Mm-hmm.
and then we would all go ski together all day. And then usually some of us got our passes pulled for skiing out of bounds, and but we were a good group and we had a lot of fun together. I actually started working at 14 years old. I was plowing the parking lot
Mm-hmm.
with a John Deere 644 loader. So I was probably one of the youngest kids doing that, and I loved being able to do that and just be a part of all of the expansion and growing up through it and watching lifts being installed with helicopters and all that stuff was kind of neat as a young guy.
And did you know from an early age, Wes, that you wanted to work at Greek Peak as your career? Or was there a moment later on when it became apparent that this was just the right path for you?
I'm not sure that there was any particular moment. Definitely the friendships and the camaraderie in this business is different
Mm-hmm.
than a lot of other businesses. Everybody's willing to help everybody. And then the friendships along the way and the different families and personalities. It's always been interesting and fun for me, and pretty difficult to walk away from all of those relationships that have been built over the years.
And did you always work at Greek Peak? Did you go away for a while, work somewhere else? Or is this just you started at 14 and you've been there ever since?
Well, I did work at another resort in the Catskills.
Mm-hmm.
It was Deer Run. It was
Mm.
originally Scotch Valley.
Okay.
I've worked at some other as president with John and Mark. We ran Toggenburg for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I have worked at other areas, but the ski business in general at all of those areas was kind of the same. There's kind of a core group that make it run. And there's definitely relationships and friendships there that you have for a lifetime.
So Scotch Valley, it's interesting that you had some experience there, Wes. So that's a ski area for the listeners that went out of business like late 90s-ish. It was about the same size as Greek Peak, a little less vertical, I think around 750. What is it? And New York is littered with lost ski areas. There's way more lost ski areas than active ones, even though New York has more than any other state. What is it, in your opinion, Wes, about Greek Peak that has allowed it to sustain and stay in business when so many other ski areas around New York that also had good natural assets, good terrain, good snow belts, whatever, went out of business? So why has Greek Peak made it?
Well, I think, the couple of unique things about Greek Peak. Number one is the location. It's central New York, so it's central to everything in the state, and which is a positive. I think the terrain is unique. You talked about earlier skiing with your family. There is a green trail from the top of every lift at Greek Peak. So having the ability to do that with your terrain, I think, is huge. And, the local community has always been super supportive of Greek Peak and what we were trying to do. And then, ownership, whether it was during my dad's time period or during Mark and John's or John's time period, they've always kind of been hardcore skiers or wanting to see the ski side of it continue and expand. And I think that support has added to the success and ability to keep it going.
How much do you think the interstate helped? I don't know when that came through exactly, I-81, but you're just a couple miles off. And I have to think that was at least part of the sorting mechanism there's still some that are tough to get to, like Plattekill, that made it somehow. But for the most part, the ones that are there, you can get to fairly easily.
Well, I think it has a big impact. When IBM used to be super big in Binghamton back in the heydays of Greek Peak, and then, we get some business out of Binghamton, northern Pennsylvania, Elmira, Corning, Ithaca area, but certainly I-81 has helped us.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things, Wes, about of a family business is I don't think that everyone will want to work with their family, and other families just have better dynamics. But I know there's sometimes tension when you have that kind of environment. Growing up and watching your father run Greek Peak, and then now having the opportunity to run yourself, what did you learn from him, take away from him, watching him run the ski area? And then where did you try to differentiate yourself and make Greek Peak your own?
Well, I think I would say that, my father was a true entrepreneur. He did things that people said couldn't be done in the little town of Virgil in central New York. And so learning from his vision and ability to push forward when maybe not everything was lined up the way it should have been. And then, I think that the transformation for me is to be able to take some of that knowledge and some of what my dad did, and working with John, who's a super smart businessman, who operates several businesses in New York State, and really trying to make all of the facts and figures and all of the data line up so that you're making wise management decisions, and try to keep yourself out of trouble by using the facts and figures. So I think that's been a learning experience, and it's been a privilege to work both for my dad and for John.
It sounded like Al really embraced the impossible project. And you've referenced a couple times these things that people were like, that's not something you can do, and he does it anyway, or things weren't lined up and he did them. What are some examples of ways that Greek Peak evolved over the years that maybe people would have told your father, you can't do it that way, but he said, you know what, we're going to make this happen?
Probably the biggest example is Hope Lake Lodge. That was a huge project to take place in this part of the country or central New York, especially the small town of Virgil, with no huge metropolitan areas close by to support it, because we draw from all over the state. It's not like, Holiday Valley that has Buffalo and Bristol that has Rochester right next to it. We have that challenge. But I think Hope Lake Lodge was probably the one thing that he was looking to make Greek Peak more of a Four Seasons operation than just a seasonal ski area. And I think he met with the people from Vail and a bunch of different ski area experts, and they basically were not overly encouraging to him with the ability to be successful with putting Hope Lake Lodge in. And it was a quarter share property. And I do remember having a meeting with him that right during the construction, the building was halfway built, and that's when the economy pretty much tanked. And he was like, okay, now what do I do? I'm halfway through this. I really don't have a choice. I have to keep going. And he did, and he got it done. And, it's up and operating. And fortunately, I think the local community support and the camaraderie and the people that believe in Greek Peak are part of what brought Mark and John along to, their families skied here. They were here with their whole families, and when they heard about the issues that Greek Peak was going through, they stepped up and kept it going. So I think that's huge.
Let's talk about the Hope Lake Lodge for a minute, because living in New York City, people ask me all the time, where can I go where I can stay right on the mountain with my family? Because if you go to Gore or Whiteface, you can't build on the mountain, so you have to either stay in Lake Placid or you have to stay in Lake George, and those are drives to the mountain, and no one wants to do that every day on vacation. So I think New York loses a lot of destination business to Vermont, because if you go right next door, every big ski area in Vermont has ski in, ski out lodging, and plenty of it. And I find that folks in this city don't know as much about Greek Peak, but I thought it was great. It's not ski in, ski out necessarily, but you have that shuttle and it's really efficient. It's right across the street. So once you open that, and I know it was a tough economic time, but looking back now, 16 years later, how has that changed Greek Peak, the way that you operate, the way that people experience it, the way that people consider it when they think about, when they're considering, okay, where am I going to spend a weekend skiing with my family?
Well, I definitely think it has changed. When Hope Lake Lodge originally opened, we did a lot of marketing in New York City, which is super, super expensive. And, trying to hit that skiing population is difficult. And it certainly was a challenge. And I think that's why, now with it being Four Seasons, we expose more of the population to Greek Peak. We do get a lot of people that come here for a wedding, or the Edward Jones group, or, a bunch of the other groups that we've done over the years. They end up bringing their families back once they see Hope Lake Lodge and the beauty of Hope Lake Lodge, and then the mountain right across the street. Taking that skiing population, which is like 3% of the population, it's tough to narrow it down to those 3% and get the word out to them. But I think, we keep working at it gradually every year. I think more of the events that we do have created more exposure for us. And we still try to do some promotion and advertising through the city in New Jersey.
Yeah, I had Joe Hession on the podcast recently, and as you know, he is a partner of yours in your ticketing with his software system, but also operates Big Snow right across the river from Manhattan, the indoor ski area, and Mountain Creek in New Jersey. And he said that people always say to him, "Oh, you're so lucky you have the New York City market." And he said, "Well, try marketing to the New York City market with its expense and all the other competing things for your attention." I've been talking to people a lot about it, just because a lot of folks will go to Camelback, which is twice as expensive for the on-mountain water park, and it does not have as good of a snow belt to operate in. So I'm a big fan of the lodge. Aidan, before we get into the John Meier era, I'm curious to hear your perspective and where you came to Greek Peak from, just to get the context, because I don't know if you grew up with it. Maybe you did grow up locally, and maybe you came in from the outside. So give us your background briefly, and whether you grew up skiing and how you arrived at Greek Peak.
Yeah, I'm not native to Central New York here. I grew up down in the Catskills. Woodstock actually is where I grew up. So when I was a kid, I used to ski at Bel Air and Wyndham. That's kind of where I got my passion for the industry. Never thought I'd end up in the ski industry. I moved up here for college. I went to SUNY Cortland for my bachelor's and master's. And at first I thought this was, my part-time job to put myself through school. But as Wes kind of talked about the culture here, it's I would say a little intoxicating. It sucks you in, and I haven't looked back. I've been here for I think 14 years now, and it's really become a passion of mine. And I love working for Greek Peak.
So Mountain Ops is tough. There's a lot to deal with, especially in a state like New York, where you do have to, let's face it, deal with midwinter rain, freeze thaws, all kinds of things. You have kind of an older lift fleet. Talk a little bit about why you like that challenge of trying to do something so hard on a regular basis.
Yeah, I don't know if it's I guess it's just something that you're born with. I did start originally when Al was still the owner, right? I started right in that bankruptcy era. So I've got to, kind of grow up and learn from guys like Al, Wes, and then when John Meier came in, and, I look up to these guys, and, they all work very hard. They set an example for me to kind of live up to. But yeah, the ski industry is like running a small municipality. It's, everything from running, high voltage electric lines to snowmaking, plumbing. It's every day it's something new. And I think that's what makes it exciting. You're definitely never bored.
Yeah. And I know the new owners have been really pouring some capital into it. So let's talk about that ownership transition. And Wes, you've laid out for us why it was necessary to do that. And I think we all know that 2008 to 9 was a tough time in America just in general. So it's good that you found a way through. And the Greek Peak today is, from my point of view, a better Greek Peak than the one that you had 16 years ago. However, I have to imagine there was some personal process there to hand the deed over to someone else when your family had been so involved for decades. And I know you're still involved, but was that difficult? Or did you just process transition, say, you know what, I'm not going to be sentimental, I'm just going to move through this? What was that like for you? How did you deal with that?
Well, it was definitely a difficult process to go through. My brother was involved. He graduated at the top of his class in Cornell, and my dad, my brother, myself, we probably spent 15 years or better working together to help build Hope Lake Lodge and the Adventure Center and some of those products that we offer. And then with the financial difficulties, it was definitely a tough situation to get through. Then, when new ownership took over, it's always difficult because they want to put their mark on it or their name on it, which is very understandable. And the first couple of Thanksgivings with my dad were a little tough because he wanted it to be done his way. And I kept telling him, look, I don't work for you anymore. I work for the new owners, and I have to do it the way they want to do it. So that was a little tough, but I think he understood it in the long run, and I'm sure it was difficult for him to go through. But I think new ownership has treated me well. They listen to my comments. They don't necessarily always do it the way I suggest it, but the fact that they're willing to listen, and then I've learned a lot from them. Definitely a different approach, and a good approach. They want to see it expand. They want to, be good and provide a good product to the customer base. So I think although it's been difficult, I think it's been good, and it also is that opportunity for everyone that's helped build Greek Peak over the last 65 years. to continue that dream or all that hard work that everybody put into it.
When you saw that the resort was having financial issues and started looking around for a buyer, did you intend to continue working there, or did you think, okay, I'm going to be on my way out the door? And did John Meier and the other owners say, no, we want you to stick around and ask, or did you lobby for that? Kind of take us through that process of how you ended up sticking around.
Well, I was definitely a little bit nervous
Yeah.
because, in a lot of the transfers of ownership, they take out all of the old management. So
Mhm.
I was looking around. I'm a big horse guy, so I
Mm.
had looked around at some horse training
Yeah.
jobs because I figured if I get thrown out, I'm going to have to do something. But they did, new ownership did keep me around and asked a lot of good questions. And as I got to know them and realized that their vision was to move it forward and expand it and provide a good product, and they weren't in it just to make a buck. They were in it to move it forward and expand it. It was something that I wanted to be a part of.
So they take the keys, they're officially the owners, and you mentioned that they had been longtime skiers, they knew Greek Peak. I don't have to tell you it's a different experience to ski a resort than it is to run one. So how did you, Wes, help them understand, okay, this is what's working, so don't go chasing, don't put $5 million into fixing something that's not broken. Here's where we need to improve, while also respecting that there were probably some things they were going to want to do to take the resort in a different direction. How did you help set all that up?
Well, I think, John Meier is a hardcore skier.
Mm-hmm.
His children are skiers, his wife's a skier. They've been a part of the mountain for a long time. And I think having that perspective, that skier perspective, and knowing what the expectation is of the skiers and the type of product that John wanted to deliver as the owner to the skiers, I think is an interesting prospect to have and bring to the meeting table when you're having the executive meetings about what are we going to do next, what are we going to spend our money on, what needs to be fixed, what doesn't. Um, it's an interesting perspective to have. A lot of presidents are skiers, but they don't ski every day or every weekend and
Mm-hmm.
every holiday. So I think John and his family brought a little different perspective to the table. Um, and there's certain things that I think over time we've learned together. It's kind of like one of the big mistakes is, and this may not sound great from a customer service standpoint, but you put 4,000 people through here on a weekend and you get two or three complaints, and you change your operation based on those two or three complaints. And now, because you changed your operation for those two or three complaints, you now have eight or nine complaints
Yeah.
because you changed something that wasn't really a problem
Mm-hmm.
to the mass, to the people that really enjoyed the product. So I think that's been kind of an eye opener that, we need to respond to all of the customer comments, but we don't necessarily need to react to
Mm-hmm.
every single comment that's out there. And I think that's the difference of actually operating the ski area versus being the participant.
And it's harder than ever because there's so much noise and so many channels and so many ways people can complain that they couldn't do 20 or 30 years ago. So how did those conversations go, Wes? What did you tell John was working and what wasn't, frankly, and where did they need to focus their efforts and resources?
Well, I think, snowmaking has certainly been a big part of it
Mm-hmm.
because we were pretty inefficient, back in 2013. As an example, our Odyssey Trail was one of our racing trails, and the snowmaking on that trail, it used to take us like 8 hours to set that trail up and get it fully
Mm.
running with the snowmaking. And Aidan came in with a proposal and we made some changes there. And I think Aidan wanted to do it just to prove to me that he could do it. And when they got everything set up, the first night of snowmaking over there, he came down the trail by himself and he started the trail top to bottom in 10 minutes. So I think he was at a dead run, but um, he got it all running. And I think it's just the efficiency of the snowmaking has been a huge benefit for us. I think the lift maintenance has been another area where we have made some strides forward. And replacing the old 1A with the Visions quad certainly increased the capacity to the main side of the mountain. And we continue to have a pretty strong lift maintenance program. Hope Lake Lodge and modifying some of the things that we do up there, because what it was originally designed to be was a quarter share vacation property where people would come and stay for a full week. And we do get some of that, but that is not the bulk of the business. The bulk of the business is, that weekend, 2 or 3 night stay, and having plenty of things to do with our adventure center and all of the indoor water park and changing the restaurants. And it's a different product from what it was originally designed to be. So that's been a little bit of a challenge as we've moved forward.
So Visions Quad, Snowmaking, Hope Lake Lodge, all that's come together for a better product. And Aidan, we'll get into that in a moment. Wes, I just want to, John Meier said something really interesting to me a few years ago when I was writing a story about Toggenburg, which he had sold to Peter Harris, who then closed it. And John's comment to me was, skiing is not inevitable in central New York, or something like that. It might have been, there doesn't have to be skiing in central New York. His point was, this is not necessarily or automatically a business that turns a profit easily. And he's been willing to invest in order to, I assume, make it a profitable resort. Without putting you in the position to speak for John, just looking at Greek Peak as a whole, I mean, this is a guy who's a businessman and he's been successful in many areas. What's his long-term vision, or what is Greek Peak's long-term vision? What does the ski area have the potential to be? Because I think what you've described so far is its evolution from a day ski area to more of what we think of as a ski resort. But I know you're never done. So long-term, where are you trying to get to with Greek Peak?
Well, I think the issue with Toggenburg is more that I think John's heart is in Greek Peak and wants to see Greek Peak expand. And originally, Toggenburg was purchased to try to get into the Syracuse market, to use Toggenburg as a feeder for Greek Peak to bring the Syracuse people in. And we did get some of that, but certainly not what we expected. And then the amount of time and effort that it was taking, because a lot of the Greek Peak staff had to, go to Toggenburg, and we were involved in the accounting and the mountain operations and upgrading the lifts and the electric. And it was just taking away from what John, I think, felt could be done at Greek Peak. So I think he really wanted to concentrate on Greek Peak and how we moved Greek Peak forward. And I think long term, definitely, looking to expand it. The east side, I'm not sure if you and your family got a chance to go to Chair 5 and Arcadian Gate, but that's some of the best skiing on the mountain. But we don't have snowmaking over there. And, it's a really long, flowing trail. And we get, when we have the natural snow, we get a lot of comments about that trail being one of the nicer trails at the facility. So, I think the long-term plan is to continue to make improvements and expand the facility for the customer experience.
When you say expand, do you mean there could be more trails and a bigger skier footprint, or are you talking mostly about expanding snowmaking?
I think it could be both. I think we do own a fair amount of land over on the east side. There's definitely some steeper terrain between where Chair 5 is and back towards Chair 4. So definitely more land is available to expand it over the years. But I think the east side where Chair 5 is, there's a lot of really nice terrain over there that we'd like to have more accessible or open more often. So definitely the snowmaking and additional trails.
So could you expand those trails between 4 and 5 with service by existing lifts, or would you need to add another lift into that zone?
Some of it could be expanded from the current lifts, but some of it would need a lift in there. There's actually there's an older master plan that has a Chair 6 that is even further east of Arcadian Gate, and there's some additional terrain over there that could be serviced. So that would probably be the direction we would go, because the terrain between Chair 5 and Chair 4 coming back this way is pretty steep.
Yeah.
The terrain on the east side of the current Arcadian Gate is a little bit better.
And could you go all the way to the summit over there? Chair 5 currently lands below it, as is Chair 4. I'm not sure what you own or what the potential is or what the terrain's like.
Yes, there is the highest point in Cortland County marker up there, and we own right near that, so we could take a lift up to the summit of that.
What do you think it would take to make that happen? I love talking about expansions. I love seeing expansions. Obviously, it's very expensive, and there's always this push and pull of, do you build it and they come, or do you build it because you're getting more people? And a lot of the bigger companies now tell me, like when Keystone was expanding a couple of years ago by 600 acres, they said, well, we're not trying to get more skiers here. We're trying to spread them out better. So with Greek Peak, I imagine you might want to make it bigger to better compete with Catskills resorts, for example. So what would it take to make that expansion happen? Is this something where you want to reach a certain volume and it happens, or you just need to get the capital and then hopefully maybe you can make Greek Peak into more of a destination?
Well, I think it's a little of all of that. I think, again, looking at the numbers, looking at the statistics of what's working, what isn't working, definitely having more than one good ski season in a row would be helpful. That's probably one of the biggest things. But, we have a pretty good experience now, with the volume that we have of skiers. I don't think, on our busiest day, we might have a 5 to 10 minute lift line. We don't have half-hour waits and all of that. So we disperse the customer base pretty evenly, and I think it is a pretty good experience for the people. But I do think, John's long-term plan is to expand the ski area and continue to make improvements as long as it makes good business sense.
That's exciting. And key to that, I think, with the more consistent conditions will be snowmaking. So Aidan, when I was there, you laid out for me some numbers that I'm not going to try to repeat because I'll get them wrong, but I'll let you do it. They quantified how much Greek Peak has evolved its snowmaking over just the past 3 years. I think you're in year 3 of a 5-year plan or something like that. Lay this out for us. What did Greek Peak snowmaking look like when you came along? And Wes gave us a good little preview of that, going from an 8-hour setup to 10 minutes. What did it look like then? How has Greek Peak improved it? And what do you want to get to?
Yeah, really, I kind of got involved with snowmaking right after the 2015 season. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a really, really bad winter for most of the Northeast. And we did struggle that year to make snow. Back then, I was in food and beverage full time. And it was a rough winter for us. We had to let some people go. And that, I was digging into the root cause of that and how can I help prevent this for the future. I started sneaking out at night and working with the overnight snowmakers, kind of getting a feel for what went into the snowmaking operation. And just taking that winter to kind of observe and see how we did things. I kind of wanted to help modernize it. And it's interesting, I wouldn't say Greek Peak had a bad snowmaking system. It was just old. So we needed a lot of upgrades to the current infrastructure. And as we looked to make it bigger, it was kind of this chicken or an egg situation. Without getting into too much of the nuts and bolts of it, when we looked at our snowmaking system and said, why can't we be better? And the first answer, or the seemed like the obvious answer was we don't have enough compressed air. I'm sure as a lot of your listeners know, it's high pressure water and compressed air is what we use to make snow. So you ask the question, why don't we have enough compressed air? Do we need more compressors? So when you start looking at the size of our compressors, well, this seems pretty appropriate for ski areas our size. Okay, so if we don't have, or if we have enough compressed air, what else are we struggling with? So old school snowmaking back in the 70s and the 80s relied on low pressure water. Ratnik were some of the original guns in the industry, and you could put 150 psi water to it and make snow. And the way you could do that is by sending 800 CFM of air to it, to kind of compensate for the low water pressure. So it turns out after we did a little bit of digging, what our issue was is we had low water pressure on most of the mountain. The reason we had low water pressure is because we had old, outdated infrastructure as far as the pipes. They couldn't handle that increase in pressure. So over the last, we're in year 4 out of year 5. We have started essentially replacing some of the oldest pipe on the mountain that was susceptible to leaking and couldn't handle that new increase in pressure. And we're talking about going from around 350 psi out of our main pump house. Our new target is 500 psi. The reason we have that is because we want to have 300 psi as our lowest pressure anywhere on the hill on top. That's what modern snowmaking guns really require to be efficient. So over the last few years, we've worked our way across ripping out old pipe, putting in new pipe, and in the process also upgrading our pumping capacity and installing new snow guns. It's really, really kind of revolutionized what we can do. Kind of put that in perspective, this past season or the season before, in talking with Wes, 2 years ago probably would have required about 1,500 hours worth of snowmaking to have the conditions that we had. With the new updated system, we were actually able to have the entire mountain open in 750 hours of snowmaking. Oh, wow. We've cut the workload in half. And to further accent that, this past season was the first year we were ever able to actually shut down snowmaking in January. Okay. We had the entire mountain made across before we hit February, which historically we'd still be making snow during President's Week.
That's amazing, because I want to underscore this point. Not only are you reducing your hours, but you're expanding the number of trails that have snowmaking. I imagine that whoever's paying the utility bills is also seeing some improvement there. What can you tell us about those areas as far as where you're expanding to and the energy that it's taking to make more snow than you used to?
Yeah, the best part about this is, we put a better product out for our customer, and it's actually helping us financially.
That's great.
One of those Ratnik guns that I referred to that would put out, 700-800 CFM of air, a modern HKD or even modern Ratniks that we run, they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 to 40 CFM. So we can run 30, 40 of modern snow guns to every old one that we used to run. So from an energy perspective, we can fire, 5-6 times as many snow guns across the hill for the same amount of air, which is really allows us to save on the man hours and also reduce our electricity costs.
So where are you at with coverage as far as all of the trails? Do you want to get to 100%? Do you want to leave a couple natural snow trails? Where are you and where do you want to be?
I think everyone here, including John, would love to see it 100% snowmaking. That's one of the nice parts about working for someone who's a hardcore skier is he gets excited whenever we're talking about this stuff, probably to the detriment of the executive team. I think they cringe a little bit when I start talking about snowmaking. No, everybody loves it. It's really figuring out how to make it work with the financials each year, because there's other projects we have to invest in. But it's been a systematic approach to replace that old infrastructure and then bring new trails online. In the past few years, we've added snowmaking to a couple trails that didn't have it in the past. And recently this year, as we round out this 5-year snowmaking plan, we've been starting to set up the next 5-year plan. And a lot of that includes the east side. And, how do we get that entire side of the mountain completely weatherproof so that our customers can ski it year round out there?
So another interesting part of the cost savings piece of all this, and maybe you mentioned this, but I'm curious to what extent you're using automation and how big of a team it takes to cover more of the mountain faster as compared to the number of folks you used to have to deploy in order to do the same amount of work or less, actually.
It's interesting. The snowmaking industry is definitely going towards automation, full automation.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we've kind of taken the stance that semi-automated is where we want to get to first. I think that's the biggest bang for our buck. Okay. And what that means is we still have to send a snowmaker to each gun to turn it on, but we have new hydrants that are called click hydrants from HKD, where we don't have to drag hoses around anymore. And really, from the research that we've looked at, you get about 90% of the efficiency upgrade from going semi-automated as you do from going fully automated at about half the cost. So our goal is to work our way across the mountain to go fully semi-automated. And then from there, we can make that next investment if we need to go fully automated. I would say from our crew size, we've probably cut our crew size in a third and can run 5 times as many guns. It's pretty impressive.
That's incredible. So I think part of the reason why Greek Peak is not at 100% snowmaking already, which many East Coast ski areas are, is that you're actually in a pretty nice little snow belt. And I think you might get lake effect from 2 directions, from Erie and Ontario, but I'm not exactly sure. Talk a little bit about the snow belt that you're in and how that helps you and it enables you to be able to open something like Chair 5 that doesn't have snowmaking most, if not all, ski seasons.
Yeah, it certainly is a great location for that. Although the last few years we haven't gotten a lot of natural snow. So I think that's why we have this big push for full snowmaking across the resort. We always have the discussion, what's the point of having a trail if you can only ski it 5 days a year? We want people to be able to enjoy it for 100 days a year. I'm sure when you were here, the conditions were great and it skis amazing when we have the snow. So we're just trying to bulletproof it so it can be like that, all season long.
Hey, you're kind of far inland for lake effect, it seems. So is that a lake effect band that you get?
It is. Yeah. Okay. Yep. I would say we used to have it more. I'm sure Wes can speak to this. Back in the the early 90s, we had a lot more snow. The last few years, it's dried up a bit. I would say the last big storm we had was Winter Storm Stella in 2017. But we do get 6-8 inches here and there. It's pretty nice. What
do you think, Wes? Have you seen or documented a decrease in lake effect over the decades?
I think there's definitely, less natural snow than there used to be. I'm sure some of that has to do with the climate change. Some of it is just the cycles of the weather. And, there are occasionally where we're colder than we've been in a long time, colder than we were back in the 80s. So I think, it's definitely more of a challenge now than it used to be. I mean, when I was a kid, walking to the school bus, I can remember walking over the hoods of cars that were stuck in the snow, and I haven't seen that in a lot of years. So that's all kind of behind us, I think.
Well, you do still get enough snow to have a pretty good glade skiing scene, which even some resorts just south of you in Pennsylvania don't get that or have that culture. And it's funny when I talk to some of the old school Greek Peak folks, they'll tell me, oh yeah, they used to be if your skis would come up 1 inch off the snow, patrol would pull your ticket. And maybe they're exaggerating a little bit there. But talk about the evolution of the ski area from a terrain point of view, because I don't know if this is directly the Meier era, but if you look at the trail map history, you've definitely cut more glades over the past decade, but you started cutting them even before that. So and there's terrain parks all over. Talk about this evolution of Greek Peak from maybe this old school stay on the trail and carve mentality to a little bit more of a free ride mentality that you have today. So I think it's a really fun mountain with a lot of really playful, fun terrain.
Well, I think initially, I want to say probably the first or second winter of new ownership with John, and um, I got a call from Ski Patrol that John Meier was skiing out of bounds, and what do they do? And I said, well, he does own the place, so if you want to try to pull his pass, go for it. But I'm guessing that's not going to work out well for you. So I think John is he's definitely that kind of skier. I mean, he likes the terrain. He's pushed for more glade skiing. He enjoys that. The first couple of years, there was always John and a pack of 5 or 6 of his friends that were always skiing out of bounds, and I would get called all of the time. But I think it was informational and brought a new perspective to the table as far as the number of skiers and riders that enjoy that. I also think the fact that we started doing mountain biking contributed to that and our ability to have more glade trails because we were doing different maintenance on mountain biking trails. But certainly, I think John's ownership has lent itself to more of that type of terrain. And we have hired an outside company, CNY Freeride, and Travis McDowell to do our terrain parks. So I think that that has helped.
So let's dig into another area where the Meyers made some immediate improvements, and then where I think a lot of your frequent skiers may have some questions. And that's the lift fleet. So I'll say first of all, your lift fleet is very efficient. And when I was skiing there, which was on a holiday weekend, by the way, it was MLK weekend, other than some early morning pinch points, which you would expect, I didn't wait any lift lines. Most of the time, I was skiing onto the lift. It's also a dated lift fleet in many ways. You have lifts. Lift 1 is from 1971, Lift 4 is from 1970, Lift 5 from 1978. Lift 2, I think, is awesome. It's this Carlavaro Savio machine, and it dates to 1963. And I know you've done lots of work and updated them as well. And you've made a couple of replacements. But as you look at your lift fleet as it's currently constructed, what's your wish list? What do you want to improve? What would you like to replace next as we look down the line?
Well, I think that, every area, the wish list is to, have new lifts. But the price tag of that is not very realistic for a mountain of our size. I think most a short detachable quad is like $6 or $7 million, and that's a huge investment for a facility that does 120,000 skier visits a year. That's a tough thing to make work with the numbers when you're trying to look at the facts and figures and how does this make sense. I also I think the big hype out there is detachable lifts, and I don't buy into that as much because I think it changes the experience. And I've talked to some of the smaller mountain operators that have some detachable lifts, and they say, the customer that used to come and stay 4 or 5 hours, now he comes and he's gone in 2 hours because he's tired himself out by just making loops. And I think that, the skiing experience at Greek Peak is great with the terrain and the camaraderie. And I'm not sure that a detachable lift is what Greek Peak needs. But I definitely feel like, the current lift assets that we have, we try to maintain. That old Savio lift is probably more reliable than some of our other newer lifts that we have. So, it is a difficult one. And I think from a customer service standpoint, everybody would say it would be great if I could have 6 detachable quads and take out everything I have and put in detaches. The customers would be happy. But I'm not sure that that's what the Greek Peak skiing experience needs to be.
But that lift 2 is so cool to ride. It's still got the old wood slat benches, and it feels like a time machine, especially if it's snowing up there. Aidan, I'm curious from your point of view as a mountain ops guy. I mean, it sounds like it's a reliable lift, but what do you do when you need parts? Do you have to machine them? Do you have a guy? How do you keep that lift up to date?
Luckily, there is a lot of parts out there in the industry that, that we have for the hauls. And, that lift can be a little bit of a challenge. We did just replace all the grips on it, I think 2 years ago, so we have the ability to replace parts when we need to. We've updated a lot of the drives on these lifts. Lift 1, we did a huge upgrade on it last year. So that's all brand new brains to the system. So kind of what the customer sees is that old steel, which is, got a lot of integrity. There's nothing wrong with it. And we make these, I would say, soft upgrades to the lifts that allow them to continue to run, for the foreseeable future. Chair 2, I think it's the oldest chair in central New York, one of the oldest chairs in the country for sure. But like you said, we got a lot of people that love the nostalgia of it. And I don't know, you weren't here for night riding, but that lift does ride at night, and there's no lights up there. So it's this really cool experience that you don't get at a lot of ski areas.
So you did make a recent replacement. In 2022, you took a Von Roll triple that Wyndham had removed, and they had installed that lift in the early 80s, and you replaced your lift 3, which was a Hall double. So Von Roll, as I understand it, is still serviced by Doppelmayr, even though they haven't made lifts under the name in a while. But talk through that decision, how that's worked out, and if that's the sort of replacement we can expect to see at Greek Peak for lifts in the immediate future, because the Vision Squad was a brand new lift, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But in general, are you looking for good used lifts on the market that have good integrity you can replace, and how happy are you with that one in particular?
That was a really cool project we got to work on. Wes was down there as well as I was. We actually went down to Wyndham and picked that lift up. We loaded it onto trucks and brought it up here. We sent it out for engineering. It sat here in our yard for a few years before we actually put it up while we waited for the engineering and permits to come in. I think two good components to that is, one, it allows us to train our mountain staff to know these lifts in and out from building it from the ground up. Our lift ops team knows this lift in and out. That lift was originally, I think, 4,500 feet or almost 5,000 feet at Wyndham. It was a really big lift, and we're only asking it to go 1,400 feet. So everything on that lift is overbuilt, and it's going to be a solid, reliable transporter for us for years to come. We completely replaced all the safety components on it, the brains that run that lift. The other added benefit from it is it actually had the same carriers as we have on Chair 5 over on the east side. So we actually pulled all of the chairs off of Chair 5 and used the chairs from Wyndham on that. So we have footrests now. So there was kind of a really good synergy bringing that to our mountain.
So talk a little bit about the decision, because you just mentioned that Lift 1, you just replaced all the brains on that. That's a 1971 haul. Lift 3 was a 1969 haul. This is all according to Lift Blog's records. So talk about the decision to replace Lift 3 completely, but then with Lift 1 say, no, in this case, even though that's a longer lift and a taller lift, we can get away with a renovation rather than a replacement.
Well, I would just chime in here that Lift 3 was a shorter lift, so it makes more revolutions than any of the longer lifts. And as Aidan had mentioned, the steel is one of the concerns, that, making sure that the integrity of the steel is still good. And we had seen some signs on Chair 3 of some steel fatigue. And so that was really why the decision was that, that was going to be the first lift that we would replace.
So as you look for potential replacements for your other lifts down the line, 2, 4, 5, sounds like 1 was just upgraded. Are you thinking, do you have your eyes on the market for more lifts like that one that came out at Wyndham, like good lifts that have been taken care of that you can repurpose rather than trying to enter the new market as you did with the Visions lift?
Well, I think we're always going to keep an eye out there. I mean,
Oh,
I don't believe there's anything wrong with older lifts as long as the maintenance has been done properly. And I wouldn't rule out, newer or a new lift depending on the pricing and what happens with Trump and his tariffs and all
yeah.
that fun stuff.
So going back to 2013, you did put in a new lift. So this was a nice Doppelmayr quad. It's carpet loaded, so it's able to run at a faster speed, even though it's a fixed grip lift. So take us through the decision there where you said, okay, I think that replaced a Borvig double. So why was that the right decision in this case, not only to go with a new lift, but to go to a quad and a carpet loaded quad, as opposed to just fixing up that old double and having those two doubles run side by side up the front side?
I think the Borvig lift, we had a lot of issues with that lift. The shiv trains were on a swivel arm,
Mm,
and that arm would keep getting out of alignment. So we had a lot of alignment issues with it. And it was a constant problem lift. And being on the main side of the hill, we felt we needed something much more reliable than
mm-hmm.
that. And adding the Visions quad and with the load carpet was kind of a way a way to do a detachable lift without doing a detachable lift.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's any other place on the mountain that would be appropriate for that type of carpet loaded machine where you have a longer line, like maybe over on the east side?
Yeah, I think what we've talked about is the potential of having a lift like Visions where Chair 4 is
Mm-hmm.
to, feed the east side of the mountain as we look to expand the east side.
Mm-hmm.
I think Chair 4 would be one that we would have to look at the capacity of that lift to feed the east side of the hill.
Do you like where all the lifts are, where they load? Because as I mentioned, they were all built in previous decades, and lift 2 goes and 4 go from not necessarily mid mountain, but up on the mountain, which is probably part of the reason why you have fewer lines. But as you consider your lift fleet long term, would you like to have more of them that come all the way to the base, or are you pretty happy with the way it's set up and where everything is in general?
I would say, I don't know, Aidan may have a different
Yeah.
opinion, but I feel like we're pretty well set up. Lift 2, that Savio lift used to come all the way to the base.
Oh, did it?
And one of the modifications was we shortened it up and moved it up the hill to try to give more space for the beginners
Okay.
in the base area. And we added, a carpet lift so that we had more space for beginner teaching.
Okay. Were customers upset about that? Did they get used to it quickly? Did they get what you were trying to do?
I think for the most part, they
Oh.
they were okay with it. It does create a little bit of a challenge because to get out of the base, you have one Visions or Chair 3.
Mm-hmm.
If you were trying to disperse the crowd, if you had a crowd issue at the base, then you might look at doing more lifts out of the base, but we really, at the current time, don't have a huge issue with crowds in the base. The other thing that helped with Chair 3 was we went from a double to a triple. So it increased the capacity. The one lift that we used to get a lot of lines on was Chair 3.
Yeah. Aidan, you have any thoughts on the lift configuration across the mountain in general?
I think the only modification I would make is kind of what we talked about earlier with terrain expansion is a longer Chair 4.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's cool how it's kind of offset up on the mountain a bit, and people appreciate that. If we were to take for example, a Vision style lift that length and put that in the Chair 4 lift line, we could actually add more terrain to the east of Arcadian Gate. That's really only the real modification I would make, where if you're a Jackson Hole, I don't want to compare us to Jackson Hole, but it's a lift that's offset and you can kind of ski that pod for the day and not return to the base area.
It does ski big because you have this cool combination of narrow trails and glades and different zones that, like you said, are offset. And when you can't see one chair from the other, it always does make it feel bigger. I always know that if I feel a little confused, that's a good thing. That's the sense I'm looking for. And Greak Peak skis bigger than it is. All right, let's wrap up today with the Indy Pass. Greak Peak was a founding Indy Pass mountain, meaning that you were on there for the first season, 2019 to 20. And I give Doug Fish eternal credit because he's a Northwest guy and most Western people won't even look at Eastern skiing or consider anything, but he saw the importance of that market and came east, and you were among the first that he signed up. So I'm not sure, Wes, how involved you were in the process, but what was it about that vision about Indy Pass that appealed to you in 2019 when it was just this very experimental, unproven product?
Well, I think at that point in time, a lot of the smaller ski areas were doing reciprocals with each other. And then, we were competing against the Epic and Icon passes that were kind of the big talk at that point in time. And I remember walking through the trade show and seeing the Indy Pass booth and stopping by and talking to Doug, and Doug and I hit it off pretty quickly. And, I guess the thing that got my attention is that I would actually get paid for somebody else coming to my resort that might not have come to my resort. So, that was interesting to me, and to see that they've been able to manage the finances of that and distribute some revenue to the participants is, I think, better for the smaller resorts than just doing the reciprocals. And we've kind of gotten away from reciprocals and we just do the Indy Pass now, and it's definitely a financial benefit for us.
How has that worked as a recruiting tool? Just anecdotally on social media, it seems to me as though a good number of people who wouldn't have tried Greek Peak otherwise will drive the extra little bit to try it and find that the skiing's really fun. It's a very, what I call a balanced mountain. I think it's a very hard thing to achieve, where you have all different kinds of terrain for different levels, for different people who like glades and open trails, and all these things we've been talking about with your snow that helps the snowbelt and everything else. That's just my perception from the outside. From the inside, I don't know how much data you have, but how has Indy Pass acted as a good billboard to bring people into Greek Peak who might then come back?
I think it's been really good. I don't have the figures in front of me right now, but it has grown every year. I probably 2 years ago, I was riding up Chair 4 with a dad that had gotten an Indy Pass, and he brought his whole family here. And he was very happy with the experience. And he basically said without Indy, he never would have stopped and tried Greek Peak. And I don't know whether he's come back, but I certainly hope he's come back several times. He said that he was having a great time, and his family was. So I think it's good exposure for our mountain. I think the challenge with Indy is to make sure that not all of the surrounding ski areas participate, because it gets to a point where they would stop buying the Greek Peak Pass and just buy the Indy Pass because they could go to all the central New York areas. So, that was my conversation with Doug early on was, I'll participate in this as long as people will still buy the Greek Peak Pass. As soon as it gets to the point where they stop buying the Greek Peak Pass and buy the Indy Pass, then we have an issue. But I also think it's a benefit to our pass holders. There's an Indy add-on, which is a little bit cheaper for them and gives them the opportunity to go, ski other terrain. And so I think it's a good product.
It sounds like you're happy with it because you're going into, I believe, year 7 with it. So, all right, Wes, Aidan, I'll give you your day back. I really appreciate your time. Lots of good stuff happening at Greek Peak. I am glad to hear you had a good winter, and I really enjoyed skiing up there. Can't wait to come back next year. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. All right, that was Wes Kryger, president of Greek Peak, New York, and Aidan Wilbur, the ski area's vice president of mountain operations. Awesome job, fellas. Thank you so much for helping me to throw a spotlight on central New York, the home state of the Storm HQ, and a vital part of the American ski ecosystem. Tons more pods in the pipeline, including a stacked lineup for you, New England, with the leaders of Killington, Sugarloaf, Waterville Valley, and Stowe, all scheduled to join me on the podcast over the coming months. I'll have more for you to New York with the leaders of Kissing Bridge and Woods Valley joining me on the pod. Of course, I always have a lot going in the other regions. We have Blue Mountain, Ontario scheduled, Marquette Mountain, Michigan, Swiss Valley, Michigan, and out west, Taos, Purgatory, Snowmass, and many, many more. You will want to subscribe to the Storm Skiing newsletter at stormskiing.com to get those conversations the moment they are live. You can also follow the Storm on X and Instagram and YouTube at Storm Ski Journal. Until next time, stay well, stay safe. I'm Stuart Winchester, and I'll talk to you again very soon.
Storm Skiing Podcast is a Quicksilver Films production.